What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and Lamp podcast. I am here with Steve,
Hello.
and today is going to be a big episode. I know I say this a lot, but today really is going to be a lot of content, a lot of different things going on. It's going to be our season finale, quote unquote. So today we're going to be wrapping up the 2019-2020 NHL season, as well as the Light and Lamp podcast's first season. Don't worry, season 2 is literally starting in less than a week, because season 2 is going to start with the draft, which is next Tuesday. So you don't have to wait that long for the next season to start. But I think what we're going to start with, we'll just wrap up the Stanley Cup Finals that just ended 2 days ago, and then we're going to be going
First
over...
one we finally got right.
Well, sort of. I almost got it right.
Well, I mean, we had the matchup.
Yeah, you had the winner and I had the matchup.
So, I mean, hey, not bad.
Yeah, first time in like forever. Actually, first time ever, I think, that I've ever... It's definitely the first time I've ever gotten a matchup completely correct. And I think it's the first time ever that my winner hasn't been knocked out in the second round, so...
My winner usually goes down in the first round, so I gotta stop betting on those teams.
So we'll do that. We'll wrap up the finals. We'll wrap up the regular season awards, and then we'll talk about some other miscellaneous NHL news pertaining to this previous season before we move on to start with the draft next season. So Stanley Cup Finals, Tampa Bay secures their second franchise Stanley Cup with a 2-0 win in Game 6. It is their second franchise Stanley Cup, the first one obviously coming back in 2004. It is their third franchise trip. Obviously, they went back in 2015 where they ended up losing to the Chicago Blackhawks. Your Conn Smythe winner was Victor Hedman. He had 10 goals, 12 assists, 22 points in 25 games played with a plus 13, and he led the team in ice time. I mean, just an absolutely ridiculous run from Victor Hedman. What did you see in this Stanley Cup Finals? Like, why did Tampa win? Why did Dallas lose? What was your overall thoughts on the Stanley Cup Finals as far as, quality of hockey, what you saw from it, and what you saw from the two teams?
Well, I mean, the quality of hockey was great, right? I mean, there was by the end of Game 6, I had pretty much had no question about whether or not there should be an asterisk next to the Stanley Cup, right? Like the winner, which is what a lot of people were saying, right? Because of the bubble. But I mean, they played great. Both teams really, really put on a show, you know? I think Tampa Bay just at the end of the day ended up being too fast. Like they were too much for Dallas to handle at all.
I think what ended up ultimately sinking the Dallas Stars is there's two things that I really noticed that killed them. I mean, first, we have to talk about the power play difference between the Lightning and the Stars. I mean, the Lightning, in the two games that they lost, didn't score a single power play goal. In Game 1, they went 0 for 3, and in Game 5, they went 0 for 1, and they lost those games. Then Game 2, 2 for 4. Game 3, 1 for 4. Game 4, this was huge, 3 for 4 on the power play in a game that they won by 1 goal. And then Game 6, 1 for 3. Overall in the series, Tampa was 7 for 19 at a 36.8% clip. Dallas just had no answers for that Lightning power play. Dallas, on the other hand, went 1 for 19, 5.2% efficiency, and that's just not good enough. And that kind of goes into the second point that I noticed about Dallas, and I actually tweeted about this at the beginning of Game 6. There's just no adjustments being made on the side of the Dallas Stars. I mean, listen, you'll give them a pass for Game 2. By Game 3, you have to know that the power play is an issue. You have to know certain things about the Tampa Bay Lightning, that they're a much different team than anything Dallas had played against up to that point. They were a very unique, unicorn kind of team. And yet in Game 6, really in Games 2, 3, 4, and 6, they just kept ramming their heads against the wall. It was so obvious that they wanted to funnel the offense through the point. And it's not an issue, but it's an issue when the Tampa Bay Lightning are shutting that down. The shots weren't getting through. They were getting a ton of shots blocked, and they never established the play below the goal line. And that's really a play that the Dallas Stars should have been able to make use of, because a lot of their forwards are bigger than the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially in the top six. I mean, Jamie Benn, Alexander Radulov, Denis Gurianov, Corey Perry got moved up to the top six, Joe Pavelski. These guys are bigger than a lot of the top six on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they really should have been able to establish that play from below the goal line into the bumper spot or into the slot, and they never did. Every single time the puck was in the Lightning zone, the Dallas Stars were trying to force feed the guys at the point to get a shot through, and it just wasn't working. And I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been to be a fan of the Dallas Stars and just sitting there like, look, this is not working. It has not worked since game one. And there's something to be said for sticking to your strengths as a hockey team, but at the end of the day, you have to make an adjustment, especially after game three when you get slammed 5-1. There has to be an adjustment from the point of the Dallas Stars, and there just wasn't. And I want to pose this question to you. You know, it's hard to say, oh, it's hard to boot a coach that just brought you to the Stanley Cup Finals, but do you think that the total lack of change from the Dallas Stars since game one should fall on the shoulders of Rick Bowness? And do you think that he might have just coached his way out of that top coaching spot by not making any changes?
I mean, I didn't think he was going to be permanent anyway, considering that they never really decided whether or not what they were going to do with him all season. But, I mean, I don't know. I'd can him, honestly. His track record's not very good, and I mean, yeah, he brought Dallas to the Stanley Cup Final, but they really should have been better than they were through these playoffs. I mean, I remember you and I talking about it in the first and second rounds. They just they struggled really against teams they shouldn't have. He really couldn't get a lot out of their big guns. I mean, Tyler Seguin was quiet pretty much all playoff long. He really didn't get anything going. They were relying honestly, really heavily on young guys that had no weren't tested in the playoffs. You know, Kivi Ranta put up, I think it was 5 or 6 goals in the whole playoffs after not having played any NHL hockey, I think. Miro Heiskanen led the team in points. I don't know. I wouldn't retain Rick Bowness, especially now with some of the other coaches out on the market still. I mean, Gerard Gallant's still on the market, I believe, so I think that'd be an interesting fit. But ultimately, like you said, I think it does fall somewhat on the shoulders of the coach. He just never seemed to have them prepared to play the Lightning. And, I mean, they forced 6 games, but they got outplayed, what was it, like 90% of the time? I think, yeah, what was it, in game 6 at one point, it was like 15 shots to 3. Like, it was some ridiculous total.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just, even if you want to disregard a lot of the stats, the eye test just wasn't good. And we know that the Dallas Stars, one of the things that they wanted to do was activate their defensemen to join up on the rush and take a 2-on-2 into a 3-on-2 or a 4-on-3 and get that extra skater up the ice, which is fine, and it was working against some of the other teams. But by the end of game 3, you have to make that adjustment. You have to look at this and say, look, it's just not working. And our cycle game from on the half boards to the point every single time is not working because our shots aren't getting through. And if they're not getting through, then we're not generating second chance opportunities, and you're just not going to beat a goaltender like Andrei Vasilevsky clean that often. So, I think there needed to be an adjustment of get the puck to below the goal line, get a few passes into the bumper zone for a quick shot on net, get a few passes into the slot for a one-timer, or even just start taking shots from the half boards and force those defensemen to play a little wider off the net. But instead, they tried to force it to the point every single time. The defensemen and the wingers did an excellent job of just clogging the middle. The shots weren't getting through. And look what ended up happening. And to your point, this is something we had been saying since the Calgary series. By game 3 of the Calgary series, we were both sitting there like, look, this isn't working. The book has been read by the National Hockey League, and you have the big-bodied type of forwards with some good enough shots like Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn, Gurianov. These guys can score off the wing, and they've done it before. But when you're limiting them to just basically being uh, you know, a belt-fed machine just giving pucks to the point, the play just becomes too obvious, and there was never an adjustment made. And especially on special teams, there was never an adjustment made. I mean, you can't go 0 for 4 or 0 for 3 in game 4, lose by 1 goal, let in 3 power play goals, and sit there and be like, yeah, this is fine. Like,
This is really working, guys. We got this one.
and I don't want to take anything away from the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're a fantastic team. They deserve this Stanley Cup. Nobody even ever forced a game 7 on them. The team that came closest to knocking them out was the Islanders, which when they forced a game 6 overtime. They never played a 7-game series. No team was able to take them to 7. They knocked out the Blue Jackets in 5, the Bruins in 5, the Islanders in 6, and the Stars in 6. So I don't want to take anything away from the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's just got to be frustrating from a Dallas Stars fan point when it's so obvious that what you're trying to do isn't working and your coach seems super unwilling to change the formula.
Yeah, I mean, they were pretty hell-bent on just trying to just funnel everything up high and go to and like, listen, I appreciate them wanting to go to the front of the net and jam for rebounds and maybe get some greasy ones, because again, like you said, that Vasilevsky isn't going to get beat clean that often. But I mean, like you said, it just didn't work. And they have talent up front. I don't know why they didn't try stretching the rink out, you know? Even like I know Tampa can skate and their roster is probably faster than Dallas as a whole. But Dallas's top 6 really, I mean, they really couldn't they just couldn't find a way to spread them out enough to find any offense. And like you said, their defense was good, but only at even strength. They were hemorrhaging power play goals left and right.
And the
And
issue with
that's not a
the
winning. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You can finish.
I was going to say it's just not a winning formula to continually be outplayed every night and hemorrhage power play goals against a team that in the regular season had a pretty good power play. I mean, it was close to the top of the league. I don't know if it was at the top because they had a lot of injuries to guys, but still, it's a roster that you look at and you shouldn't be saying to yourself, "Yeah, let's put them on the power play."
No. The issue with the Stars also is a lot of the penalties they were taking weren't very good, I don't think. Like, you saw a lot of neutral zone, like, holding penalties and interference, just like lazy penalties.
A lot of offensive zone hooks and slashes because they weren't moving their feet.
Yeah, just like really lazy penalties. And the idea is if you're gonna take a penalty against a power play like the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's gotta be a good one. Yeah. Right. You've gotta like trip a guy who's going on a breakaway, or you've gotta hook somebody who's going to the net hard on a 2-on-1. Like, you gotta make it worth your time.
Like, if John Klingberg got caught flat-footed at the blue line against Kucherov and he pulled him down, it's like, all right, fine, I can see that. But it's like when the winger's in the offensive zone corner and the guy turns to skate away from him and he doesn't even bother to move his feet. He just reaches in and trips him. Like, it was just lazy. Like, sometimes Dallas almost looked not disinterested, but like, I don't know. They just looked out of it. They looked.
Oh, having a bit of technical difficulties here. Give me a sec, guys. This happens every now and then. There we go. All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and and granted, like I do want to go on a record and say that the penalty in Game 4 was total nonsense against Jamie Benn in overtime. You don't make that. First of all, it was the wrong call, and second of all, you don't make that call in overtime because they called him for a trip when Jamie Benn never touched his skates. And I mean, sure, you might have been able to call Jamie Benn on a hold, but when two guys are going for a puck in open space in overtime, you don't call somebody like that. So I did want to call the refs out on that one. But for the rest of the power plays, like, it's just lazy penalties. And you can't take lazy penalties against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, or if you do, you better kill the power play. Like,
yeah, that's really it. Like, it's just, you can't afford to keep putting a team like that on the power play. It'd be like looking the Edmonton Oilers in the 80s in the face and being like, hey guys, do you guys want to put up 10 on us tonight? Because we'll sit in the box all night. It's like, no, like, that's stupid. And Dallas, I don't think was particularly known for like having a problem with penalties during this season. I thought they were relatively disciplined, and they looked relatively disciplined through the playoffs, and then they just couldn't stay out of the box against the Lightning. And I don't know if it's because of the speed gap or what, but they just they did not look ready to handle that Tampa Bay power play.
So, obviously we know what this means for the Tampa Bay Lightning. There really shouldn't be a reason why they shouldn't compete for the next few seasons. Obviously, they're not going to be able to keep this whole roster together. I mean, they're going to be losing some pieces this offseason just because that's just the way it works. Like almost every team in the salary cap era that makes these runs, you're losing pieces. Like they have to sign Steven Mitchell, Pat Maroon, Anthony Cirelli. That's going to be a big one. And they only have 3 defensemen under contract, and they're projected to have $5 million in cap space. So,
I mean, I think the one thing I remember reading about, I guess, a while back was they were talking about maybe trading Tyler Johnson's contract because they have guys like Anthony Cirelli and Yanni Gourde that can play up in the lineup. Which I wouldn't be surprised if they did. They could probably also get dump salaries from guys like Palat or Killorn, who've been there a long time. But I mean, they have you got to you got to open up money to be able to sign the guys you need, like Yanni or Anthony Cirelli,
well,
because you can't let a guy like that walk.
it's not looking great when you have to sign, even if you ignore all the other players they have to sign. When you have to sign Anthony Cirelli and Mikhail Sergachev, and you're looking at $5 million in cap room, that's not going to work. Like, that's not going to fly.
No, not at all.
But there is no real reason why they shouldn't be back next season. And if not to mention, they basically made this whole run without Steven Stamkos.
He played 3 minutes in game 4 or 5, scored a goal, and never played again.
So, you insert him back into the lineup, that fills up a spot real quick. And he's still an elite player. He's only 30 years old. I mean, this guy still has another 3 or 4 years at top level production. So, there's no real reason as to why this team shouldn't be back next year. It won't be the same roster. I don't think. Well, not I don't think. There's just no way to keep this roster wholly intact. But we'll see what Julien Brisebois can come up with. I mean, he did a great job with this roster this year because he said, "Look, we're going for it," and all sins are forgiven when you win the Stanley Cup. So,
Pretty much.
but what does this mean for Dallas? Do we see? Is this a peak of the mountain for Dallas, or do you think that they can come back for the next couple of years and stay competitive?
I don't see why they couldn't stay competitive. I don't think they're a particularly old roster. I mean, I know Jamie Benn's getting up there, but I don't see why they wouldn't stay competitive. I mean, Miro Heiskanen's only 23. John Klingberg's only like 26 now. Esa Lindell's only like 23 or 24. So they've got pieces.
Ben is 31, Lindell's 26, Klingberg's 28, Heiskanen's 21. The oldest player right now is Joe Pavelski, who's 36.
And yeah, I mean, that's not bad. I don't know what their contract situation looks like after the season, though, and that's going to be a big problem for them, probably.
Let's see. They're projected to have 15 million in cap, and their RFAs are Radek Faksa, Rope Hintz, and Guryanov, and their UFAs are Corey Perry, Matthias Janmark, Andrei Sekera, and Anton Hudobin.
Well, we can pretty much guarantee that Corey Perry's not coming back.
Unless he took like a $1 million contract, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, he was great for them. I mean, he scored, 2 goals in game 5, the game winner, and the tying goal early in the game, like tied it up 1-1.
Yeah.
But I mean, Corey Perry actually looked really good. He managed to find shades of his 2010 form. He ended up being really effective for them, but there were guys that I would have liked to have seen be more effective, and I mean, like I said, Tyler Seguin really wasn't that big for them. Radulov really didn't do much. Ben was noticeable, but his goal scoring wasn't particularly anything to write home about. Um, I don't know. I think what they really need to find is excuse me, like a real true number two center, which I know we say that about a lot of teams, right? We've been saying it about Winnipeg for how long, but the truth is like Rupe Hintz is good, but right now I don't know if he's a number two center on a Stanley Cup competing team, and that's kind of my biggest gripe with it.
Yeah, I think, if you can add, you know, an elite scorer, and I mean, it's always weird when you talk about like an elite scorer because, like, that's not the way this team is built. Um, but there's still something to be said for just having, and having that like Steven Stamkos type player, and obviously guys like Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, like they have that ability to be that way, but the way that they play caters themselves more towards a power forward type build. And I mean they have options now because I imagine that Yoel Kiviranta will probably be with the big club on like the third line for the next season. So you can let a guy like Corey Perry walk and not have to worry about it. You can let like Matthias Janmark walk if you really want to. Their cap situation is better than the Tampa Bay Lightning for sure. It's not great. They're probably still going to have to try to move somebody out, but you don't really need to sign Andre Sekera because you have Taylor Fedun who can step in and play that role. So they're in a pretty good spot. 2 years from now, they're going to have some issues, but yeah, I think, and the other thing about the Dallas Stars, they still have their first round pick. So they're still in a good place. They can still add pieces to this team. And I don't see a reason as to why they shouldn't come back and compete next year on the premise of them keeping that identity together and keeping most of the core intact and maybe adding that goal scoring threat off the wing to open up that pass back to the point a little bit more.
Right. I mean, is Radulov under contract? No, right? His contract is up. Or am I
Radulov
thinking of
has
Dadonov?
2 more years.
Okay, so I'm thinking of Dadonov. That's why.
His contract
Okay.
expires 2022, 2023.
Okay. Well, I mean, there is some value to be had on that, like for pieces, like you said. And there are pieces hitting the free agency market that, again, we talk about all the time. But I mean, Mike Hoffman's about as close as you're going to get to an elite goal scorer hitting the open market. And the guy's hitting the open market.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it would just be an interesting pickup for Dallas. I think it would add a little more, like, I think the biggest detriment to their power play for like the whole year and the playoffs is the same problem the Islanders power play had, which is there was no like trigger man, right? I mean, they have the defenseman at the point that they're trying to, not force, but make the play flow through. But they don't have like a dangerous one timer off the wing like Alex Ovechkin or um, Vladdy Tarasenko or anything like that. They only had the one option, and it made them super easy to stop.
Yeah, and having an elite threat on the wing will open up the points a little bit more because you'll spread out the defensemen, you'll spread out the wingers a little bit more, make them have to come down below the hash marks and try to cover that one-timer option as opposed to now where, look, you have guys that can score off the wing, but you're just refusing to use them in that way. So why not get a guy whose only job is to do that, like,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
like if you're hell bent on Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin being in the corners, then that's fine if you have somebody on the wing that can score a goal. But if you're passing it back to your winger and your winger is Joe Pavelski, he's really not a threat above the hash marks. So,
Right.
do you have any final thoughts on the Stanley Cup Finals?
No, I mean, it was a good series. I was excited about it. It pretty much it lived up to all the hype. I mean, it was about as good as we could get with the circumstances we were given, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, and I just want to say, as somebody that was hesitant when this whole thing first started, I do have to tip my hat to the entire National Hockey League and everybody that worked on it, both in the rink, behind the scenes with planning, to pull this whole thing off. This 2 month long tournament with zero positive tests really speaks to how seriously the players took their health and safety. So kudos to them. and B, just how much planning and effort went into this from the National Hockey League. So, from hockey fans everywhere, I do want to say thank you to everyone who had a hand in this for putting this on, because I mean, this was the absolute best we could have gotten out of a bad situation, and I have no issues with the way everything turned out. I don't think anybody can take anything away from these players. In theory, if anything, this was the most fair Stanley Cup, playoff run, because there is no home ice advantage. So you really were just getting like a paper on paper matchup for the most part. Um,
And all teams were nobody came in hot. They all came in at the same level. They were all cold, you know. So you don't have a team that was, coming in like gangbusters like the St. Louis Blues were last year.
yeah, and obviously, would everyone have preferred the way that the world used to work? Obviously, that's the case, and we will get back there at some point. But I don't think anybody should take anything away from any of the teams that made any sort of noise in these playoffs, whether it be a team like the Canucks knocking out the defending Stanley Cup champions, or a team like the Islanders going from a play-in team to taking Tampa Bay to Game 6 overtime of the Eastern Conference Finals. You can't take anything away from these guys. You certainly should not put an asterisk next to Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup. And we got our fair share of stories this playoff run. I mean, Ben Bishop going down and Anton Khudobin being a brick wall. Steven Stamkos scoring in his only 3 minutes of Stanley Cup final action. I mean, we got our fair share of Stanley Cup lore from this run. And I don't think anybody can take anything away from that.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think you can take anything away from these guys. They put on, they came, they played hard, and at the end of the day, we got a Stanley Cup champion. Isn't that what we wanted?
Yeah, and it's the best. It's the best of a bad situation, I think. So we'll go on. We'll talk about the regular season awards here. We'll get the ones out of the way that weren't voting awards. So, or not voting award. The Bill Masterton Award obviously is a voted award, but that went to Bobby Ryan, who overcame his addiction to return to the NHL, and we talked about that at length. And he was bought out by the Ottawa Senators, but that was more because of his contract, not because of who he is. So I do want to say, kudos to Bobby Ryan for not only bringing his struggle to the public eye, but also overcoming that struggle and finding his way back to the NHL. And he's still a serviceable third liner, and if he can catch some of that form that he might have lost because of his addiction, I mean, who knows? Maybe next year some team picks him up and he scores 25 goals. You never know with a player of his caliber.
It's a really low risk, high reward situation, if you ask me. If a team takes a chance on him and he comes back and say he only puts up 10 goals and like 35 points and you're only paying him like $1 million, I'll take it. But if you're paying him $1 million and he just so happens to come out and throw in 25, 30 goals for you, I mean, hey, it's just a bonus, right?
It's basically found money.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially what I said about Ilya Kovalchuk at the beginning of the year, except for Kovalchuk is just significantly older and slower, you know? Ryan
Yeah.
is still young enough where he can still skate and play the game.
Yeah, and obviously, even beyond any hockey implications, it's just, it's good to see him get the recognition that he deserves. And it's good to see between like him, Robin Leonard, Tyler Mott, we're seeing a lot more of these issues being brought to the forefront, and they're being talked about, as well as the other issues that were talked about specifically during this playoff run by the likes of Matt Dumba. It's good to see these mental health issues, these racial inequality issues being tackled by players and a player-driven initiative from the NHL. So it's good to see that kind of stuff happening.
It was also good to see the NHL, like the league itself, embrace the players coming together to make a statement, you know? Whereas the NFL did all it could to like smother any sort of statements that the players were making, the NHL like really amplified it, and um I mean they did a good job. It's pretty much what we said all year about how they've been handling these things, like the racial issues of race and all these other things that have been happening this year. I think the NHL has done a really bang up job with it. Um I mean, they put We Skate for Black Lives in every game was all over the place. They let Matt Dumbo come out and give that speech. Um, it was overall, I think the NHL did a fantastic job with, the situation.
Yeah, and I think it actually really speaks to the NHL substance abuse program that we had. Robin Leonard come out of that a success story. Bobby Ryan come out of that a success story. And I don't know if Rick Bowness went into the NHL's player or
Oh,
substance abuse,
Monty, yeah, I don't know.
or if he went to a personal rehab. But either way, it's good to see players, coaches coming out of these programs healthy and successful. I mean, Bobby Ryan comes back and scores a hat trick. Jim Montgomery has a job again. Robin Leonard is one of the best goalies in the NHL now. We're seeing these success stories come out of these bad situations, and it's good to see. It's good to see that this program that was put in place is working. It's
It's also
doing what
good to
it's supposed to
see.
do.
It's also good to see people, removing the stigma associated with these things. Like Robin Leonard was untouchable because of his rehab, stint, right? But he's proven that that shouldn't be in the conversation anymore. There's no reason to talk about his stint in rehab. He's just an elite goaltender. Bobby Ryan's the same way. He's making it so you don't have to talk about his addiction anymore. And I think that's really impressive. And like you said, I think it speaks to how well and how seriously the NHL actually takes these things when people come forward with it and their willingness to help them through it. And it's still just nice to see.
For sure. So, just a tip of the cap to Bobby Ryan and obviously all the other guys nominated for the Masterton. It's always a very hard award to pick, but just a tip of the cap to the NHL in that regard. Um, so we'll go through the two awards that are not voted on. Rocket Richard is being shared by Ovechkin and Pasternak for 48 goals. Ovechkin's ninth Rocket Richard trophy, by the way. Like, just absurd.
The
We
guy's
had
just an animal.
we had a lot of first time award winners actually this year, and here comes Ovechkin with his ninth Rocket Richard trophy, um, and
I
David
mean, what can you say? The
Pastrnak.
guy's good at hockey.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why he shouldn't hit double digits. I think he's got at least one more Richard Trophy type season left in him.
At
Um,
least one, if not two or three.
yeah, for sure. And Pasternak, it's good to see, some new blood. I think Austin Matthews is only one goal behind Ovechkin, so his monopoly might be slipping a little bit. He's definitely going to be challenged. Whereas for a couple of years, if it wasn't Stamkos, nobody was really challenging Ovechkin for the trophy.
I
Um,
mean, I think it'll be interesting now. I mean, in theory, the Maurice Richard races should be more interesting now, especially if Patrick Laine manages to find his form.
or a different team, but we'll
Yeah,
have to
well,
see.
that's
That's a story that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on in the off season. Yikes.
if that ends up happening, I really don't know what's going on in Winnipeg. I really don't. Like, why would you leverage one of the best young scoring forwards in the NHL? Granted, he's a little streaky, whatever. He's only 22. You know, like, why would you leverage him for a centerman? Like, isn't the idea of getting the centerman so he can play with the centerman? Like, I don't know. I just don't understand what's going on there.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that for sure. But um, the Art Ross Trophy, we'll go into that one. Leon Draisaitl gets that for 43 goals, 67 assists, 110 points in 71 games played. Yeah, I mean, is there really much to say outside of that's just what Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid can do for you?
No, I mean that's pretty much it, right? Like they're just good at hockey, coach. Just good at hockey.
Just about the only thing they can't do is win in the playoffs. So,
Well, the only thing they can't do is be a whole team,
yeah.
and that's not on them. I mean, that's hockey. You can't win on your own.
No, you can't. Um, we'll skip down to some of the other. I don't want to say less interesting, but less interesting awards. Nathan McKinnon gets the Lady Bing, which the Lady Bing for a lot of players is often seen as like kind of like a consolation prize if you don't win some of the other ones. But he gets that 35 goals, 58 assists, 93 points in 69 games. Only picked up 12 penalty minutes. I mean, it's hard to score when you're in the box, and he knows that. So,
Yeah.
um, All right, and we'll go last one before we get into like the real nitty gritty. The Ted Lindsay, which is basically league MVP but voted on by the players. That goes to Leon Draisaitl, his first Ted Lindsay award. Um, so that's that. James Norris, this one was an interesting one. So Roman Yossi, fun fact, is the first Nashville Predators goalie to ever win or Nashville Predators defenseman to ever win the James Norris. Put up 16 goals, 49 assists, 65 points in 69 games played with a plus 22. You would think between Shea Weber, PK Subban, Ryan Suter that one of those guys would have picked up a James Norris, but no, Roman Yossi is the first Predator to ever do it. Do you agree with Roman Yossi getting the James Norris this year? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts on this one?
See, this specific year, it's tough because I love Roman Yossi and I do think he's, a top defenseman in the NHL, but I just don't understand how you could not give it to John Carlson after the year he had. At some points, he was leading the NHL in scoring, not just by a defenseman, but like in total. Like, so I don't know. I mean, he cooled off a lot at the end, and I guess realistically, he doesn't mean nearly as much to his team as Yossi does to his. That being said, though, it's not. I don't know. I just don't. I think they should have rewarded John Carlson for the season he had. I think he really. I don't think he's ever gonna have a year like this again. So I think this was his one shot at it.
Yeah, and you
Whereas I
know
feel like
me,
Yossi can keep doing it.
and you know me that normally I advocate for well-rounded defensemen to get this award. Um, I would really say that Roman Yossi's any more well-rounded than John Carlson. They're probably equal in their defensive abilities. So that being the case, I don't understand how you don't give it to the guy that was on pace to put up a Paul Coffey like season. Like, we haven't seen the numbers that John Carlson was putting up for over like 20 to 30 years, and to not award him for, and I hate awarding the Norris for offense, but when the offense is that level of just mind-blowing ability, I think you have to award it. And that's not to say that Yossi doesn't deserve it, but I mean, like, Carlson literally was on pace for a historic season in terms of producing points. So I kind of agree. I'm not hating on Roman Yossi. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but I mean, like, John Carlson was gonna break like a Paul Coffey season, and it's like, gee, like, that's Paul Coffey's, like.
Yeah. It just, yeah, like you said, like I know his pace slowed down very dramatically towards the end of the game, but that's still 75 points in what, 60, how many games he played? 69, 68 maybe? That's kind of ridiculous.
When you're leading the
I,
Washington Capitals in points, you're doing something right.
exactly. When you're leading guys like Kuznetsov and Ovechkin in points, it's like, oh, okay, maybe there is something to this. And he's not just some nobody.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll move on to the Vezina Trophy. Connor Hellebuck of the Winnipeg Jets gets the Vezina Trophy. 31 wins, a 2.57 goals against, 9.22 save percentage, 6 shutouts in 58 games played. Very well deserved, and I like the fact that the voters didn't just go with the quote-unquote easy choice of giving it to Tuukka Rask, because Rask's stats were better on paper. But I think that really the eye test more than anything this year put Hellebuck over the edge. I mean, he was the reason that the Jets were in those qualifying rounds. He was the reason that the Jets were in the playoffs. And I mean, just the amount of spectacular saves he made behind a very questionable Jets defense. I think, in my opinion, that this was a very well-deserved award, even though, technically speaking, Rask and Vasilevsky might have had better stats. I think they also had significantly better teams. What do you think about Connor Hellebuck being awarded the Vezina Trophy this year?
I mean, I like it. I think he deserved it. It was the only reason that team was even in a lot of games was because of Connor Hellebuck. So I think that's important to consider. And I would have given it to Connor Hellebuck anyway. I mean, like you said, his numbers behind a pretty questionable defense were good for the situation he was in. And I mean, he really was just the best goaltender in the league this year on most nights. He just was playing out of his mind. So I'm happy to see him finally get recognized because it seems like Winnipeg is like a media like black hole because I guys from there never seem to get any recognition for what they do, including Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler was averaging like 60 to 70 assists a season in Winnipeg and nobody was talking about it. And it's like this guy's an animal. Like what are you guys watching? He's fucking nuts.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to see that the writers and the voters didn't just go with the easy choice of, oh, just give it to Vasilevsky. And that's not to say Vasilevsky isn't a fantastic goalie, but if you know, let's not beat around the bush. That was a very Swiss cheese, piecemeal type defense in Winnipeg, and Hellebuck really put the cement on that wall back there.
Oh yeah.
So we'll move on to the Selke Trophy. Sean Couturier gets the Selke Trophy, his first career Selke Trophy. 22 goals, 37 assists, 59 points in 69 games played, a plus 21, and a 59.7% face-off rating, which is absolutely ridiculous that in a league where almost everybody at some point is taught to take face-offs, that he's winning 60% of the draws. I'm glad that Couturier is finally getting the recognition. I think that low-key he's been one of the best defensive forwards in the league for many years now, but he didn't have the name, right? He wasn't, oh, that's Anze Kopitar or that's Ryan O'Reilly.
Patrice Bergeron, yeah.
And that's not to take anything away from those guys, but Couturier
It's just nice to
didn't.
see someone else win an award.
Yeah, Couturier was probably as good as those guys. He just didn't bring the name. I know a lot of people are saying like Anthony Cirelli might get it. Kopitar's name was in there again. What do you think about Sean Couturier getting his first career Selke Trophy?
I mean, I'm in the same boat as you are. I think he's deserved it a long time. I'm going back to 2012 in the playoffs against the Penguins. I mean, he shut down Evgeny Malkin for 7 games.
Yeah, when
That's
he
not
was a
easy to
rookie,
do.
then wasn't he?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Like that's not easy to do. Sure, the offense might not have been there for him from him, but it's like, yeah, do I want the offense right now? Because like he's kind of just quietly shutting down one of the best players in the league. And this is back when Malkin had, this was 2012. He had 112 points or something that year. Like he won the Art Ross, he won the Hart Trophy. Like it was a big deal that he did that to him, but nobody talked about it. And it's like I don't understand. I don't know if it's just because, all the attention in Philly is usually around their goaltending because they have a really horrible time with their goaltenders. So I don't know if that's the reason nobody ever really noticed, but the truth is, like, he's been this good for a long time.
yeah, I remember actually watching those playoffs and just like how hype everyone was about this Couturier kid, who basically made Malkin a moot point for an entire series, and that was just unbelievable. Like, imagine as a rookie, they're like, "Hey, go guard Evgeny Malkin," and you're like, "Okay," and like you just
A-
shut him down.
And you hold him. I mean, obviously, you didn't hold him without points, but he managed to keep him from being like the game breaker that we all know Malkin can be. And I mean, he did it this year too in the playoffs. He was their number one matchup center, and I mean, he made it look easy on some nights. I mean, his defense on Barzell was really nice. Was good. He managed to shut down. Who did they play in the first round?
Montreal.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, mm, the toughest matchup I think he had was Matt Barzell, and he did a good job against him. I mean, granted they still lost the series, but I wouldn't say it's all because they couldn't stop Matt Barzell. It was more or less the Islanders were just a better team.
Yeah, so it's nice to see Couturier getting his recognition, and he definitely has the ability to win 2 or 3 more of these, for
Oh,
sure.
easily.
I'm gonna go to you on this one. Calder Trophy goes to Cale Makar of the Colorado Avalanche. 12 goals, 38 assists, 50 points in 71 games played, or 57 games played. Sorry. What I want to give your thoughts first before I give my thoughts. What do you think about this award to Cale Makar?
I don't like it. I would have rather seen Quinn Hughes win it because Quinn Hughes was the ultimate difference maker up there in Vancouver all year for them as a rookie. You could see it in the playoffs, the way he quarterbacked their power play, the way that he moved the puck from their zone to the offense. Like outside of like the points he put up, just the way he went about things, Quinn Hughes made everything look so easy and so effortless. He looked like he wasn't even trying most nights. He honestly might be the closest thing to Brian Leach I've ever seen. Like, it's disgusting how good he is. And yeah, Cale Makar is great, but Cale Makar only brings like one element to his game. He's very offensively driven. Whereas Quinn Hughes, yeah, he's not the greatest defender. I mean, he's not going to be as good as a guy like Shea Weber defending, but he's still like not an elite defender, but an above average defender, which to me is important as a defenseman. And with Cale Makar, he's below average in his own zone. Like that's the issue. I don't see why they gave it to Kale over a Quinn.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's you're always gonna need that offensive defenseman, right? You're always gonna need that guy that can rush the puck up the ice, turn a 3-on-1 into turn a 2-on-1 into a 3-on-1, because you're gonna get extra goals with a guy like that. So it's not to take anything away from Cale Makar. I just I just like the way that Quinn Hughes controls the flow of the offense in Vancouver. I think he's a more well-rounded defenseman. I think he brings certain things to the table that Cale Makar doesn't. And look, Cale Makar is nasty. I mean, in terms of offensive prowess, he really might be like the next Brent Burns, who can just put up like 70 points a season consistently. Um,
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, it's like the argument we had about Erik Karlsson for all those years. Like, how good is he actually as a defenseman? Because, yeah, sure, Erik Karlsson could put up 85 points a season, but like he was never a matchup guy. So to me, him winning all those Norris trophies didn't really make a lot of sense. He's the best quote unquote defenseman in the league, I guess, but like, would you give it to a guy who's kind of Swiss cheese in his own end and can put up 85 points? I mean, granted, that's how Paul Coffey won all his awards, and this really can be traced back to like Bobby Orr being the top scoring defenseman, winning this award all the time, and that's really where it changed. But I mean, I really do think we should either make a new award for offensive production out of defensemen and leave the Norris as the general overall best defenseman in the league, or we should change the wording of the Norris Trophy to better represent that we're looking for offense out of these guys to win this award. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, because
Because
oh, sorry, go
it's
ahead.
just I was gonna say it's just worded as like based on the player to be judged the best at his position. And it's like, okay, but like what is the best at his position? That's very subjective. Like you could be a defenseman who doesn't score any points but shuts down their top players every night. Wouldn't that make you the best at your arguably the best at your position? But you don't put up points, so you're never gonna get like talked about for this award. And I think that's kind of wrong.
Yeah, I mean that's why we see guys like Zdeno Chara only ever winning it once, right? Because Chara
Right.
is really only good for like 30 points a year, and that's why I'm a big advocate for guys like Victor Hedman who can do it in both ends of the rink and be elite in their own zone and good in the offensive zone. And that's kind of what my argument with Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. Whereas, sure, Cale Makar might be your John Carlson this year, but Quinn Hughes is going to be your Victor Hedman for maybe not like his level of defense, but like he's gonna be your well-rounded like Victor Hedman type defenseman for his whole career, and I think that's more important because he does everything a defenseman you want a defenseman to do. He might not score as many goals on the rush as Cale Makar, but his quarterback in the power play might be a little bit better than Kale because Kale is he's a little jumpy. Whereas Quinn Hughes like gets the puck and like he's just like totally in control, surveying the play. He's like, oh, backdoor pass to four people, no problem. Dink, and it's in the back of the net.
The thing with Quinn that makes Quinn Hughes different than Cale Makar, I think, is pretty much that. Like he's the focal point. Like Quinn Hughes is the focal point of the entire Vancouver offense coming out of their zone. You get him the puck, he either skates it out or he makes a good first pass, right, to get it out. Whereas a guy like Cale Makar is playing on a team with Nathan McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog and Mikko Rantanen, guys they don't need him to be the focal point when they have, a guy who can win a Hart Trophy every year and Nathan McKinnon.
Yeah, and that's again, I don't want to take anything away from Cale Makar. I still think he's a great defenseman. He's super exciting. He's a fantastic offensive defenseman. So Colorado fans, don't worry. I'm not taking anything away from Cale Makar. I just think that Quinn Hughes is a more well-rounded player, and I think that's more important, especially as a defenseman. Um, so we'll save the Hart Memorial for last because that's always the big one. We'll jump down to the two executive roles. So Jack Adams Award goes to Bruce Cassidy of the Boston Bruins. The Bruins put up 44 wins, 14 losses, 12 overtime losses, 100 points, and a President's Trophy. Kind of hate the fact that Bruce Cassidy got this award. I'm not gonna tell
Oh,
you.
I'm gonna be totally upfront with you. I think it's stupid that he got the award. They
I,
handed him a great team, and he won the President's Trophy with it. Oh wow, oh my God, that's like so hard to do. You have John Tortorella in Columbus, who's pretty much using ham scraps all season to get by, and he gets them into the playoffs. Like, come on.
yeah, I think honestly, it's kind of a sham that this award didn't go to John Tortorella because when you look at the impact a coach has on his team, Bruce Cassidy came into a Boston Bruins team that was a Stanley Cup contender, and they were still a Stanley Cup contender. So it's like, okay, he didn't do anything really. John Tortorella loses his starting goalie, his two top defensemen in Seth Jones and Zach Werenski. He lost Nick Foligno, Cam Atkinson. I mean, he was basically playing half of the Erie River Monsters roster at one point, and by the time the pause happened, they were what, 1 point out of a playoff spot. So
Something like that, yeah.
when you look at the impact a coach has on his team, it's so clear that John Tortorella is the biggest reason that the Columbus Blue Jackets were even relevant this year.
Well, I mean, just look at their playoff series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Even their series against the Maple Leafs, right? Yeah, the Maple Leafs. Like, you could see that like the reason they were able to beat teams and play teams that were better than them straight up was because of the structure. Like there was no talent. Like the talent gap was so wide between them and Toronto, but Toronto just couldn't get anything going, and Columbus ended up being opportunistic in scoring. I mean, they dragged the Stanley Cup champion to quintuple overtime in a game. Like that's ridiculous. So to not hand him the Stanley Cup, not the Stanley Cup, the Jack Adams Award, just seems absurd to me. Even a guy like Paul Maurice should have been in the conversation, if you ask me. I mean, like he took a Winnipeg team that pretty much gutted its blue line and got them into the playoffs, or the play-in, but like the playoffs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would argue honestly for John Tortorella first. You could even argue Alain Vigneault second. I think Paul
I would see it.
Maurice.
Yeah.
Um, Even if you wanted to give it to Mike Sullivan, I would understand that a little bit more than Bruce Cassidy because the Penguins did have their fair share of injuries as well this year.
Well, I mean, I think they only had Malkin and Crosby together in the lineup for like 25 games or something like that, and then Jake Gensel went down with that injury, and he still got them to finish. What was it, number 5 in the
Yeah,
Eastern Conference?
like
So I wouldn't have hated that choice either.
there's just so many coaches I think that deserved it more than Bruce Cassidy. I think it's kind of a sham. Like
It would have been like handing it to John Cooper, which they
even
did
John
last year.
Cooper like would have made more sense because John Cooper at
True.
least this year like had to adjust his coaching style to fit a newly, more rugged, determined roster. But like they just were like, "Hey Bruce, your roster turnover was basically zero. You have two great starting goalies, a Selke Trophy type guy, and David Pastrnak. Oh, you had all those guys last year too, so your impact on the team was basically nothing. Here's an award."
Honestly, I could coach the Boston Bruins.
Dude, Don
It,
Cherry could come out of retirement and coach them again.
okay, listen, Don Cherry actually had them competing for Stanley Cups though. Like, don't do my man
Well, I mean,
dirty
like
like that.
now, Don Cherry, like,
No, yeah, like senile Don Cherry. Nah, bro. He would just have he would tell Cam Neely to trade all the non-North American players. He'd be like, "Get this Pasternak kid off my team. We need some good old Canadian boys." And then he would say something like a little less vaguely racist. It'd be very upfront. But hey, what can you do?
so yeah, kind of a sham, kind of a shame that John Tortorella gets screwed, basically. again by the
Well,
league. Maybe they were mad because he called him out this year. That might have been it.
maybe. I mean, it happened last year with John Cooper too, right? Like John Cooper won it, and granted his team won 62 games. I get it, but it's like, yeah, but again, they did it with a super team.
Just kind of an autopilot team is the issue.
Dude, they had five starting all-stars in their lineup. You have Kucherov, Stamkos, Point, Hedman, and Vasilevsky, all of which were all-stars or
Yeah.
all-star caliber players, which is
I
the same thing to be said about the Bruins. Like,
I just think you have to look at the team, and that's not to say that a team that wins the President's Trophy can't have a great coach. Like for example, when the Rangers won the President's Trophy, very clearly there was a John Tortorella fingerprint on that team because he was getting guys to buy in. He was getting elite all-star type players to buy into a defensive system. I really don't notice a difference between Bruce Cassidy's Boston Bruins and what's his face, who's up in
oh,
Montreal now.
Claude Julien's,
I really don't notice that big of a difference.
because there isn't.
So the fingerprint of Bruce Cassidy on this team is very minimal, if anything. So
I mean, it's essentially still Claude Julien's fingerprint. They're still playing a very similar way, except Bruce Cassidy hasn't playing a little faster than uh, Julien probably did, but that still doesn't mean that it's not a big defensive game by the Boston Bruins. Like everything they want to do is defense first and then play offense. You know?
yeah, so kind of a sham.
Oh, big sham. Oh,
um,
also I want to mention for the Calder Trophy, I really think Adam Fox should have been in the conversation a little bit, but that's neither here nor there, and I understand why he wasn't because Dominic Kubalik was nasty this year, absolutely nasty. But for my fourth place vote, I would definitely want to put Adam Fox in there as like an honorable mention, you know?
I think he got some votes if I remember
I
offhand.
think he did. I think he ended up fourth or fifth in the actual voting, but like I just want to say like those are he's in my top three. As much as I like respect what Kubalik did, I just think like as a defenseman, what Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes, and Cale Makar were doing was much harder than what he was doing. Because it's never easy to make the adjustment in the NHL as a defenseman. And coming in as a winger, yeah, the adjustment's still big, but like the reality is you just have to skate up and down your wing. And it was just a bonus that he managed to find his game and put pucks in the net. You
That's true.
know?
That's fair. I don't really have an argument against that.
Like I'm not
Um,
trying to take anything away from him. I'm just saying, like I think defensemen were we had a really good crop of young defensemen this year. Even guys like John Marino in Pittsburgh were really like quietly went about being one of the better young defensemen in the league. So
yeah.
that's kind of just where I'm at with it, you know? Sorry.
No, you're good. They did put out a list. I forget, somebody tweeted it out, a list of all the people that received votes. I think Adam Fox was on there, if I remember correctly.
No, I think you sent it to me. I did see it. I'm pretty sure Adam Fox got like two or three third place votes, a bunch of fourth place votes and stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean the NHL had a really good. It was hard to pick a Calder Trophy like three this year. The NHL had a really good crop of young players to all step into the league and make an impact. You know.
Yeah, and ironically, it wasn't the number one or two picks this year, which is kind of rare. I mean, usually you see them even in a conversation, but I mean, there was just so many good young players this year.
I
Uh,
mean, and to be fair, Kako and Hughes were both in kind of interesting situations. I mean, Jack Hughes was in a just he didn't have the cultural issues that Capo Kako had coming over,
he just
but
had a
he did have.
roster issue.
Yeah, he had a roster issue. He also had a size issue. I mean, he's small. He's not small, but he's like 5'10". I think he was like 150 pounds, 160 pounds coming into the league. He's got to put a little more weight on, which I think he will. Obviously, he's only 18. He'll fill out, you know. But I think realistically for him, that's all it is. He just needs to grow a little bit, and he'll be fine. Because he does. He has great hockey sense and like his vision. You can't teach. And Capo Caco just had an issue where like he was in an unfamiliar country with a bunch of people who didn't speak his language, and he was like 80,000 miles from home or something. Like it's hard. It's hard to make the jump to the NHL as a North American kid. I can't imagine doing it as a European who doesn't speak the language. You know?
Yeah, and they'll be fine.
Yeah. Again, I mean, they both had. Well, they didn't both, but Jack Hughes had a pretty strong showing in the second half after the All Star break coming into the before the pause, and Capo Caco looked really good in the one playing round. against the Carolina Hurricanes. So I think those are both positive indications that those guys are making steps. Maybe they didn't come into the league like gangbusters like Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be effective NHL players or NHL superstars. Not everybody comes out of the gate like shooting, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so we'll just move on to the last executive award. GM of the year goes to Lou Lamoriello. Islanders end up 35 wins, 23 losses, 10 overtime losses, 80 points, ultimately getting an Eastern Conference Finals appearance for the first time since
1993.
Yes, and they won more games than they did in 1993. In 93, they only won one. This year, they won two. Almost had that third one. Just lost in overtime to the Tampa Bay Lightning, the eventual Stanley Cup champions. GM of the Year is always a weird award to me because the work that GMs do is over the course of so many different seasons that it's
It's
really
also very
hard. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's also really behind a lot of closed doors. You don't really hear a lot about what they do, you know?
Yeah, and the obvious moves that they make, the trades, the signings, like anyone can see that, but it's just so hard because, you know, obviously Lamoriello made some really key moves this year. The trade for JG Pageau worked out fantastically. I mean, you know, he played as high as our first line and as low as our fourth line, and he looked comfortable in every single position. You can play him on the wing, play him in the middle. He wins like 56% of his faceoffs. Just a great acquisition for a Barry Trotz type system. The signing of or the trade for Andy Green turned out to be one of the low key better moves that was made this regular season. But it's just weird, like the GM of the year idea, because not every GM goes out and makes 3 or 4 moves in a single season. It's a lot of times it's over the course of many years.
It's
Um,
methodical. It's very like slow. It's a big picture job. It's not like a coach, right? Where it's a small picture. Whereas a coach, you go game by game with a coach. You're like, all right, well, they're not playing well. It's got to be him. A GM, it's like, okay, well, this season might not have been very good, but like you can see the big picture. You see all the pieces he's moving, all the moving parts coming into frame. You're like, okay, this makes sense.
like
You
even in
know,
theory, like you could technically, if you wanted to get crazy about it, who's the GM in Ottawa? Is it Pierre Dorian?
I don't remember his name. They've had so many GMs recently. Them and Buffalo have gone through like 3 or 4 GMs in like the last 4 years. I don't
It
remember.
is still Pierre Dorian.
It
It's
is
like
okay.
even if you wanted to get technical about it, you could in theory say that Pierre Dorian should get GM of the year because coming into this draft, the Senators have 3 first-round picks, 4 second-round picks, and 2 third-round picks, which is absolutely insane. That is mind blowing to have
And
9 picks in the first 3 rounds.
in addition to all the young talent already on the roster, I mean Thomas Shabbat. They pulled off that trade with Vegas for that other defenseman, the Swedish kid Eric Brandstrom, who's going to be nasty. They have Logan Brown. You have Brady Kachuk. You have Anthony Duclair, who I think is still there, or do they trade him?
He's an RFA, so yeah, he's
Okay.
still on the roster.
But you know what I'm saying? So like now all these picks, like you said, I could honestly really see Dorian being nominated. I could have seen Jeff Gordon getting at least like some sort of nod for it. Not just as like a Ranger fan. I'm not saying he deserved to win it over Lamorel. I'm just saying like the moves that like Jeff Gordon had been making up to this point to finally get this team into the playoffs when 2 years ago we were like bottom feeders is really impressive. I mean, all the young talent he acquired, all the trades he made, all the smart drafting. But I mean, I'm okay with the Lou Lamoriello one. I think he did a fantastic job with the Islanders, like what he did with their roster. So I really have no complaints with the GM of the Year award. I do agree though it is a strange award to try to hand out because like you said, GM's work is over the course of years. It's like a plan. It's not like something you do overnight.
Yeah, I honestly probably would have given it to Jim Benning um, for the JT Miller trade and the Tyler Myers signing. Um, but obviously, I have no qualms with what Lamoriello did. 2 moves that were sneaky good moves, and then the signing of Derek Brassard in the offseason, he was a solid third liner for us, so I have no issue with it. Wouldn't have been my first pick because I think there were guys like I think Jim Benning. But so we'll move on to the big one. both of us, I know, are going to have a lot to say about this one. Leon Draisaitl wins the Hart Memorial Award, the first of his career. I'll go to you first on this one. What do you think about this award going to Leon Draisaitl?
I would have rather seen it gone to McKinnon or Panarin. Um, they didn't outscore him, but the award isn't for the highest scoring, isn't for the highest scoring player in the league. It's for the most valuable player, and I think McKinnon and Panarin are way more impactful on their teams than Leon Draisaitl is. I'm not saying Leon Draisaitl is not like probably a top three player in the NHL right now, probably or anything like that. I just think when he's on a roster with a guy like Connor McDavid, he doesn't have to be the guy every night because Connor McDavid is the guy every night. Whereas if Panarin's not doing anything, like who's really scoring on the Rangers? Zibanejad, yeah, Kreider, maybe, but like without Artemi Panarin's 95 points, the Rangers don't even sniff the playoffs this year. Without Nathan McKinnon, the Colorado Avalanche are significantly worse than they would be without him or with him. You know, so those are two guys I think were more deserving of it than maybe Leon Draisaitl. But again, I'm not going to try and take anything from Draisaitl's season. I mean, 110 points in 69 games or whatever he played was unbelievable. Guy was probably going to hit 130, 140 points, which is something we haven't seen somebody do since like the 80s.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you here. I don't really like the fact that Leon Draisaitl got this award. And this is something I've been saying, you've been saying, a lot of our friends have been saying for years now, which is they have to change the wording of the award or start handing it out for what it's supposed to be. Because the wording is the player deemed most valuable to his team. And by that mantra alone, in my opinion, far and away, the clear most impactful player on his team has to be Artemi Panarin. I mean, it's not even a question. Like, without Artemi Panarin on the New York Rangers, sure, you have Zibanejad who scored his, what, he got like 40 goals and
41 goals in 57 games.
which is like mind blowing, right? Ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that being said, you take Panarin off this Rangers team, maybe Zibanejad. I mean, I know they didn't play together all the time, but when they did play together, maybe Zibanejad doesn't get those 40 goals. The Rangers certainly don't get even close to the playoffs without him.
I mean, he was averaging at least 2 points a game through the first like 40 games of the season or something. Like he was on the score sheet every single night. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable to watch, honestly. Like as a fan of the team, seeing him every night, this is the first time since probably Yager or maybe Gabrick's first couple of seasons in New York where we have a guy that I look at and I'm like, wow, he really breaks the game. He goes out there and he can do whatever he wants against whoever he wants, and nobody's gonna stop him. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the impact he had on the Rangers team outside of his points was also so significant because he managed to open the rink up for them. Like the way he holds onto the puck, the way he skates the puck, his vision, his passing, the way he makes the team around him so much better that it's just hard to argue. And I think the same thing about Nathan McKinnon. Like they're both make their teams around them so much better. Whereas I feel like Draisaitl really, yeah, he makes guys better, but I feel like he benefits from riding shotgun with Connor McDavid a lot. And I know they broke them up a lot this year, but like the point still stands that on that power play, which was scoring at like 29%, like the highest it's been since the 1978 or something. Like you're riding shotgun on that power play with Connor McDavid all year, like you're gonna put up points. It's just gonna happen, you know. That's how I see it anyway. Like I just don't see the impact that Draisaitl has on that Edmonton Oilers team being as significant as either Nathan McKinnon or Artemi Panarin.
Yeah, and it's not, again, it's not to take anything away from the type of season that Draisaitl had. It's just that his individual impact on the Oilers is lower than the individual impact of a guy like Artemi Panarin. So they either need to reword the award and just call it the league MVP, or they need to start giving it out for what it truly is, which is the player most valuable to his team.
Right. And I mean, they got it right a couple of years ago with Taylor Hall. They passed over Connor McDavid for it and gave it to Taylor Hall, who had 93 points in 82 games to get the Devils into the playoffs, and they gave it to him because he deserved it. I mean, yeah, his impact on that team was incredible, And you could see it this year when he wasn't playing well. That Devils team wasn't doing much, and then when they traded him, they did even worse. So, you know, it's just it's it's just stupid. To me, it's like the Norris Trophy. Like the wording of it is so like vague, but not. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's like the most valuable to his team. It's like okay, but like what does that mean? There's a lot of ways to be valuable to your team. Like I would argue guys like Cal Clutterbuck or Matt. I would argue the entire Islanders' fourth line might be more valuable to their team than a guy like maybe Jordan Eberle would be, or you know Brock Nelson. Like that's their MVP. Those guys are the identity of that New York Islanders team. So like, what are you really looking for in an MVP trophy? Is my issue. Like, there's so many like factors that don't go into it that I guess you have to go by scoring, but like it's still not a really big representation of like what the guy actually means to his roster. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't like the way that
And
they
it's the
hand out
same
this
thing.
award.
And not to go backwards, but it's like I said, it's like the same thing with the Norris Trophy. Like the player deemed to be the best at his position. Okay, but like what does that mean? There are a lot of ways to be really good as a defenseman, but like we just keep handing it to the guys that score a lot of points because apparently that makes them the best. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah, for sure. Um, do you have any final say on any of these awards?
Um, no, not particularly. I think they kind of went as everybody expected, right? Like everybody well, the only one that was a surprise to me was the James Norris. But other than that, like everybody else was kind of open and shut cases, right? Like, and the Coach of the Year award I knew was going to go to Bruce Cassidy because of the Bruins, but I mean, it's just so stupid. It's the same way the NBA handles their Coach of the Year award. Whoever wins the most games gets Coach of the Year, and it's like, okay, but the guy's coaching Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal every night. I could win 65 games with those two guys. The same thing goes with Bruce Cassidy. He's got Patrice Bergeron. He's got the perfection line, which, by the way, I still hate that Jack Edwards got that to stick. But the perfection line of Bergeron, uh,
Marshawn.
Pasternak, and Marchand. Like you coach those three guys, you have two guys who hit the century mark almost every year. You have
And you have
48 goal scorer in Pasternak, and you have 105-point scorer in Marchand from last year. Like it's not
Rask and Halak.
right. And you also have Charlie McAvoy, like
Crew, like McAvoy, Krug,
Krug,
Chara.
Chara, like
Not,
it really did just become like, wow, you coached them to 53 wins. Oh my God. Well, I don't think it was that many, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, great, cool. The Bruins are really great. It's like, I could have coached that roster to 50 wins.
yeah, for sure. Speaking of a roster that you can coach to 50 wins, we're going to wrap this podcast up with some NHL news stories, two ones in particular. We'll start with a very confusing trade coming from the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins trade Patrick Hornquist to the Florida Panthers for Mike Matheson and Colton Sevier. Now let's play a little game here. First of all, I'll tell you right off the bat, if this was supposed to be a cap move, somebody needs to tell Jim Rutherford that he actually lost cap space with this deal. But second of all, let's play a little game. How many years do you think Mike Matheson has left on that contract?
3, 2, 3 maybe.
Mike Matheson. And we dropped the connection again. Oh, there we go. Just give it a second here. We'll come back up. We'll rise from the ashes here, like a phoenix. Hello.
Hello, sorry, my Discord like bugged out.
So, and how much money do you think he's making? Like, without looking it up.
I saw the contract. I'm not gonna lie. I saw the contract on Twitter, but I'm gonna be totally upfront. I don't remember it. I think it's like 3. It's over. It's north of 3. I think it might be close to 4.
So Mike Matheson has 6 years left.
Oh my God.
And
6 years?
next year, a modified no trade clause kicks in with an 8-team no trade list at $4.875 million. 6 years at 4.875.
Did they sign him to the Mark Stahl contract? Like, what is that? Why
his
would you
contract
ever sign Mike
extension was 8 years. Started 2 years ago. when he was
Why would you
24.
ever sign Mike Matheson to an 8-year extension?
Let me
He's a
read you his.
serviceable.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, God. I was gonna say he's a serviceable middle four guy, like your bottom pairing, your second pairing defenseman, but like $4.8 million? You can go out and get guys like that in free agency for like 3.5. I mean, what's his name? Edmondson just got 3.5 or 3.7 up in Montreal, and he's a better defenseman than Mike Matheson.
I'll read you his stats from this year: 8 goals, 12 assists, 20 points in 59 games played, -1, 14 pims. His playoff stats: 2 games played, 0 points, -2, 8 penalty minutes.
Look, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and trash Mike Matheson as like as if I know him personally, and I'm not gonna begrudge him for signing a big contract because if someone throws $4.8 million at you, you take it and you don't ask why, you just do it. But from a GM standpoint, like why? Why would the Penguins lock themselves into that? They're an older team. They don't need. I mean, you said he was 24 when the extension kicked in, so what is he, 26 now, turning 27?
Yep.
Ugh. You're gonna be paying this guy until he's 33?
Do you want to hear his stats the year he signed that contract?
Was it
2018,
ridiculous?
2019.
Yeah,
The
let's hear it.
So the year before, this is the year he signed the contract, right? For the
Mhm.
for the season after. So the year he was coming off of when he signed that: 10 goals, 17 assists, 27 points, -1, 61 pims in 81 games. The first year of that contract, 8 goals, 19 assists, still 27 points, -24, 44 penalty minutes in 75 games. This, and I say this
Why?
without jest, and I'm not joking. This genuinely might be the single worst contract in the National Hockey League. Like
It's
like dollar for
it's up
dollar,
there.
it's not good.
I mean, like the Louis Eriksson contract is bad, the Andrew Ladd contracts are bad, but like they have their term isn't as long anymore. They're coming up on like their second to last years on the contracts. So
Six
it's like,
years
okay,
left.
with a modified no move clause.
So like if he doesn't want to, he submits an 8-team no trade list. You could trade him to any of the 20. Well, at that point it'll be 24 teams, or 23, not counting the Penguins. Um,
Right. But like, why? I look at some of these signings that these GMs make, and I just don't understand. I also don't understand this trade from Pittsburgh's perspective because they're negative on the transaction. They lost money,
I gotta
and
be
they
honest with
lost
you.
a valuable player. Like, I don't understand.
I don't understand his trade from either team, because
No.
from the Florida Panthers perspective, okay, great. You get Patrick Hornquist. He's a guy that, he makes his living in front of the net, who is a kind of a player that they had Barkov kind of in that role, but you really don't want Alexander Barkov being relegated to a screening role on a power play. It's kind of a waste. So you get Patrick Hornquist, you stick him in the front of the net on a power play, probably generate some more power play goals that way. Fine. I mean, that makes sense. He's a solid second line forward, which is something that they need in Florida.
But my big question is, what does this mean for Mike Hoffman and Evgeny Dadonov in Florida? Those are two guys I'd rather have on my team than Patrick Hornquist, probably. Because Evgeny Dadonov is up this year for a contract, as is Mike Hoffman. And Mike Hoffman's been a consistent 20, 25 goal scorer his whole career. And I think on the right team, he could hit 30. And Evgeny Dadonov quietly put up 75 points 2 seasons ago. Not this season that just ended, the season before, and nobody talked about it. So it's like those are two guys I'd rather see stay in this lineup. But with Patrick Hornquist's contract, I just don't see them being able to swing it, which doesn't make any sense to me from like Florida's perspective. Like they seem to be going backwards, especially going all the way back to the Vinny Trocheck trade to Carolina. I don't understand. Like, yeah, you got Eric Howlow, that's good and all, but Eric Howlow is like an okay second line center, but a really good third line center. So you traded an elite number two center for an okay number two center and really didn't come out ahead on that one. And then now you go and trade a young defenseman who's got an awful contract, yeah, sure, and Colton Sevior, but you get a guy who's like 33, 34 on a still pretty terrible contract for how old he is. Like, and you come out, I mean, yeah, you come out net positive on it because you saved the money, but like, don't you want to compete? Isn't the idea with Barkov and Huberdeau to compete now because they're hitting their stride? They're like 25, they're like 24 and 25, like they're getting ready to be competitive for the foreseeable future, where the team doesn't look like it's going to be competitive at all.
Well, that was my big thing with the trade was, you know, sure, you get Patrick Hornquist who fills a role on this team that you need. You need that guy to go to the front of the net. That's fine. The issue I have with it is it doesn't make sense in the context of the Vinny Trocheck trade, where you acquire Patrick Hornquist, who's 33. He's got 3 more years left on his contract at $5.3 million. He's the kind of piece that a team making a Stanley Cup run should acquire. That one extra
Right.
guy, that guy that you can put on the second or third line, that depth player. But when you trade your second line center for Eric Howla, who's an unrestricted free agent, by the way, so he could walk and you get nothing out of that deal essentially. When you trade a guy like Vinny Trocheck, you don't then go and trade for a guy like Patrick Hornquist. It doesn't make any sense. It's very weird,
Who's the
especially
GM down there?
Florida Panthers general manager is Bill Zito.
Oh, that's right, because he what's his name?
They,
The other GM quit or got fired.
they canned him after they lost to the Islanders.
Yeah, well, who was it again? It was I don't remember. It doesn't matter, but like it seems that whoever the guy they got to replace him is making the same, smooth brain trades that he was making. Like, I
Yeah,
just don't get it.
it's
I don't mean to be insulting to anybody here on the podcast. I mean, like honestly, but this is just boneheaded. And I don't understand it from Jim Rutherford's perspective either.
I don't know what he's thinking with that
Like,
Mike
don't you?
Madsen contract.
Isn't the idea to extend your competitive window when you still have Crosby and Malkin, but by taking on this cap, you've only made it harder to retain the pieces that you're going to need to make these runs with these guys? I mean, I've been seeing rumors that because of their cap situation, guys like Chris Letang might be available. Justin Schultz, they're probably not going to be able to sign. He's going to hit the open market. That's a big part of their power play that they're not going to have anymore. All because Jim Rutherford went out and made a trade for a guy that really doesn't even fit on their roster, and I don't understand why you would want to pay him $4.8 million with a no move clause for 6 more years. There are so many better defenseman options out there that you can go and get for cheaper that were on the market. I mean, they could have realistically gone out and gotten Edmondson out of Carolina if they really wanted to. And they could have paid him the $3.7 million he wanted because now you'd be coming out ahead. But instead, they go and trade for a guy who's got 6 years on his contract and all but force themselves into a cap meltdown in 2 years from now. Whenever they have to sign Jake Gensel, this whole thing is going to go nuclear and that whole roster is going to explode.
Well, Jake Gensel signed until 2024, but I really think the issue that this rises is not even just necessary. I mean, obviously, it's a terrible contract, it's a terrible trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest issue that comes with this is Crosby's 33, Malkin's 34, Chris Letang is 33, right? So realistically speaking, you probably have 2 to 3 more years of a competitive window before Malkin's 37, Crosby's 36. You start to shut it down a little bit, right? Even when that happens, say 3 years from now, both of those guys are noticeably slowing down, right? Malkin's contract is up in 2 years, so when Malkin's contract is up, you decide not to sign him. You decide,
Or
all right,
he retires, yeah, whatever.
we're
Whatever's
just
going to
gonna
happen with him.
we're just gonna let Crosby ride it out into the sunset. He can retire on his own terms. You don't, and you're like, all right, listen, now we got to start the rebuild. Well, guess whose contract after Malkin's contract is up? You're still paying Mike Madsen for the next 4 years. So
And who knows how much value is going to be added. He might be like Mark Stahl, honestly. You might end up having to give somebody something to take him off your books for you, which is exactly what the Rangers ended up having to do with that Mark Stahl contract. And that's not a situation you want to be in when you're trying to compete. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
no, you're good. So not only does it hurt you in a short term, it hurts you in your long term ability to rebuild. And it's not like, okay, he's a serviceable like he's essentially an okay top 4 defenseman with an elite top 4 defenseman's contract. You don't pay a guy this much money this long without him being like everyday power play penalty kill top 4 guy. Whereas really Mike Madsen's like, he can play on a top 4 if you need him to, but like you really wish he wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, like $4.8 million is what I'd want to be paying Tony DeAngelo for 6 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a guy that went out there and put up 50 points. The first Ranger defenseman to have 50 points is Brian Leach. Like that's a guy to be like, okay, yeah, I can see giving him like 4.8. Like he's worth it, you know. But like Mike Matheson, like even the eye test doesn't justify spending this kind of money on him or making a move for him like this. Did they not watch the first round of the playoffs where he tried to kill who did he hit?
Boychuk.
Was it Brock Nelson? Oh, it was Boychuk, right? He tried to kill Johnny Boychuk. And it's like, what? Why would you look at that and be like, that's our guy. That's who we got to get. You mean the guy that elbowed Johnny Boychuk in the face and cost his team pretty much the series? Like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah, Mike Matheson has the longest term contract on this team right now. In
Oh my
2025,
God.
2026, he's the only guy with a contract in that year. I mean, obviously, that's not going to be the case. They're going to sign a lot of
Well,
their
yeah.
younger guys to like big boy contract. But like, if everything stood still right now, come 2026, you'd be the only Pittsburgh Penguin.
That's what we call pain, my friend. Absolute pain.
So just a bizarre, mind-boggling trade.
Oh, I have a question for you.
What's up?
Do you think if the Penguins tank out this year or have a bad year and repeat their like they're falling in the first round again, do you think Jim Rutherford's out or Mike Sullivan's out?
I think Rutherford goes before Sullivan.
I'd agree. I think Sullivan's a great coach. I wouldn't fire him.
I don't think that their loss this year was on Mike Sullivan. I think that their loss this year was just. I don't want to say it was an organizational thing, but like you could clearly tell there was a bit of hubris on the side of the Pittsburgh Penguins, just not taking the Montreal Canadiens very seriously, and
Look where that got them.
look, that's not to take anything away from what Carey Price did. He willed the Canadiens into that series, but on paper, there's literally no reason why this Penguins team shouldn't have beaten that team. And I did like the trade from Jim Rutherford for Jason Zucker. I thought it was a decent trade that wasn't blowing me out of the water, but I thought it was a decent trade. But then to go and trade for Mike Matheson and Colton Sevier, lose contracts, lose cap space, and get one of the worst, if not the worst, contracts in the NHL. It hurts your window now. It hurts your rebuild in the future. And Colton Sevier is a UFA after next year. So what did you earn from this? You can't even say, "Oh, we got cap space for the next 2 years." You know you didn't.
750,000 in the hole.
Like,
Like, come on.
I don't know.
Like,
I think that Jim Rutherford's days as GM. I think what they'll probably do is keep Jim Rutherford on until the window closes, and then they'll be like, "Listen, Jim, like, unless he trades for another, if he goes out and trades for like Andrew Ladd or something, like he's getting the can." But I mean, I honestly, if I was Pittsburgh Penguins, I would fire him right now. I'd be like, "What the?"
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. If I were the owner of the Penguins, I would have called him, but like, Jim, what the hell is this?
I
What
traded
are
for
you
Mike
doing?
Matheson. Like, what?
Why? But you know the sad part is, again, the GM is ultimately the one who makes the calls, right? But this had to go up the chain of command at the Penguins HQ. This had to go through the president. This had to go through the assistant GMs. This had to go through scouts. This had to go to the owner. Like everybody had to sign off on this, and all of them said okay.
I don't think
And
any of
like,
them like looked at Mike Matheson's contract. They're like, he can't have that kind of contract, right? Like, what does he sign for 2 years? And it's like, oh god.
I just don't understand. Like, how did nobody in the room go, wait, guys, hang on, maybe we don't want to pay him that much money for this long?
It's too big a gamble. Cause like, look, there was a reason that the Panthers signed with that contract, right? Like they saw something in him. It's just too big of a gamble for a team with Stanley Cup aspirations.
Honestly, if you were looking to add a defenseman and you were looking to pay a price for him, Buffalo's trying to shop like two or three defensemen. Like they have Rasmus Ristolainen on the block, who's granted is making like five-ish, but still, I'll pay him $5 million. And then you have they had Jake McCabe also on the block, and I love Jake McCabe's game, and he's only making like 3.5 or something. Like, and even in the free agency, if they wanted to just dump cap, you have guys like Eric Gustafson hitting the market, things like, and there are Dustin Byfuglien's contract is up. Who knows if he's coming back? That's a whole other issue. But like, I guess my point is like there were other options available to them than this one that I don't understand why they looked at this one and said this is the route, this is where we're going. You know?
Think about it like this. You basically traded for half of the amount of money that you could have spent on a guy like Petrangelo. Because like
Mm-hmm.
realistically speaking, like that $4.8 million, you double that 9.6, you could probably get Petrangelo for like 9. So like you basically traded for half of a Petrangelo for like 1/100th of the value.
For
Like,
1/100th of a player.
yeah, like I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts on this just mind-boggling trade?
Just absolutely troglodyte trade. No, I don't. I absolutely do not. I think I've said my piece. It just makes me so mad. I don't get it.
So the last piece that will end the podcast off on, a very
Bittersweet day here in New York.
the New York Rangers have bought out the final year of Henrik Lundqvist's contract. Henrik Lundqvist leaves the New York Rangers as the all-time leader in regular season and postseason games played, wins,
Wins,
shutouts.
shutouts.
Just his name is littered through the record books of the New York Rangers, and I'll say my piece, and then we'll probably end the podcast on your piece, which I think is fitting. Obviously, as an Islander fan, it was frustrating having to face this guy, 4 times a year. It was
Six
frustrating
times a
that,
year for a while.
yeah, yeah,
It was 6 and 8 times at the beginning of his career.
and it was even more frustrating as we cycled through goalie after goalie after goalie to look over across the street and see, just the pillar of consistency that he was. 30 wins for like the first 8 years of his career or something like that. um, a 4-time all-star, I think. Name was perennially in the Vezina conversation. um, just a true model and an absolute,
Everything you want in a New York sports hero is embodied in Henrik Lundqvist, you know?
just a model of elite talent and consistency in the net. Um, Obviously, I don't have the same emotional ties to him as Rangers fans do, but you do have to appreciate just what he was able to accomplish on a hockey rink. And I think more than anything, um, it's not necessarily about how talented he was, but just how consistent he was. You could count on him for 60 games a year every single year of his career, minus I think the 1 or 2 that he was hurt. And really, up until 2 or 3 years ago, he was still one of the top 5 goalies in the league. So um, that's really kind of my legacy with Henrik Lundqvist, is just an absolute machine in terms of his innate ability to be consistent every year. Um, so give me your thoughts on King Henrik, and we'll leave the podcast out on those thoughts.
I mean, sorry. Henrik Lundqvist is bar none the greatest Ranger goaltender to ever step onto the rink at Madison Square Garden. I will say that to the day I die. He is honestly probably one of the best athletes I've ever seen play, and I'm not saying this just because I'm a Ranger fan, but like I watched him play every single night, and I don't think there was a guy who was a more fierce competitor or who wanted to win more than Henrik Lundqvist did every single night. Like there was a joke in the Ranger locker room at one point that like he owed the league more money for ripping paper towel dispensers out of walls and bathrooms than anybody else in the NHL. And I think that just goes to show you how like fiercely competitive he was. He wanted to win every time he stepped on the ice. Was going to leave it all out there for you, blood, sweat, and tears. And he wanted nothing more than to win a Stanley Cup here in New York. And he fell 2 wins short, and that will or 3 wins short. That will forever haunt me and my sports memories. The fact that the New York Rangers couldn't get themselves over the hump to get the greatest goaltender they've ever had, essentially their whole franchise, a Stanley Cup. That will forever, forever be burned into my memory as a Ranger fan. Like you said, model of consistency. 30 win seasons, 12 20 win seasons. I mean, finished in the top 3 of Vezina trophy voting, I think 4 or 5 times in a 6-year span. Arguably the greatest goaltender in the league, the best goaltender in the league between 2008 and 2013, 2014. I mean, it's just it's the right thing to do. The Rangers had to buy him out, but at the end of the day, it's so sad because I don't want to see Henrik Lundqvist wear any other jersey than Ranger blue. So I'm really hoping he retires and goes back to Sweden to play with his brother, which I don't think is going to happen. But I don't want to see him in any other sweater than Ranger blue. And you can bet your ass the second he retires that number 30 is going in those rafters. I honestly, they might even go into those rafters while he's still playing. I would do it this year. Like, I don't see a reason to wait. And I also would love to see the team sign him to a one-day contract to retire as a New York Ranger. But that's all for, the future to figure out, not right now. But for right now, it's sad. I mean, like you said, you don't have the emotional connection, but like for me, I watch this guy every night for 15 years. I mean, we're only 23. I've been watching him play since I was 7. Like, that's unbelievable. God, just on and also off the ice, absolute gentleman. One of the most respectful individuals you'll ever see. Founded his own foundation. He became the spokesman for the Garden of Dreams Foundation, which does so much good work in the New York metropolitan area for underprivileged children. Was always willing to donate his time to help people. Was always willing to donate time, money, effort, whatever, if it was going to better the community, because that's the kind of person he was, and that's why I think he's just honestly, in my opinion, probably the greatest Ranger of all time. Like, he's just unreal.
Yeah, and uh, his legacy in New York is undoubtedly one of the greatest just New York athletes to ever play any sport in this great city. So we'll leave it off on that. Like I said, the next episode is going to be, I believe the draft is October 6th. So we're going to be doing a live draft reaction, much like we did a live reaction to the draft lottery. We're going to be doing both times actually we did live reactions to the lottery, and then when the Rangers got the first pick, we were live for that as well. We're going to do a live reaction to the draft, the top 10 picks. We're not going to do the whole thing because it's like a 3-hour affair. I mean, we'll probably end up just chilling and watching the whole thing. But in terms of podcasting for 3 hours, that's asking a bit much.
Yeah, it's asking a bit much for people to want to stick around, and for us, it's also a lot for us. I mean, sit there and have to talk for 3 hours like that when the draft there's not a lot going on between picks.
We'll stick for the top 10. We'll do a live reaction to the top 10 picks. Obviously, probably talk about some off-season stuff going on there. And then after that, after the draft, October 9th is the start of free agency. So when we get to the draft, we'll be 3 days away from free agency, so we'll probably know a little bit more about who's signed and who's not. And then we'll probably talk about maybe some free agency stuff, in between picks of the draft and stuff like that. And then after that, it's pedal to the metal as far as off-season stuff goes, and we'll probably end up waiting until, like we did last season, waiting until most of the big names are off the board for free agency to do our free agency frenzy wrap-up. But definitely stay tuned. Next episode will be out either that Tuesday night or the day after, so either Tuesday the 6th or Wednesday the 7th. Live draft reaction to the top 10 picks coming, and then after that, the schedule is mostly just determined by how fast things develop in the NHL. So for the last time for season 1, I just want to thank everybody who's ever watched, listened, clicked on a video, left a comment. To our other friends that have been with us along the way, Tim, Joe, Nick, our friend Pete was on a couple episodes. Just anybody that helped to make this season 1 a reality. I want to thank everyone that was on the podcast, everyone that's watched and listened, and I'm just really excited to keep doing this. I want to keep doing this for as long as we possibly can. So do you have any final thoughts on anything that happened during our first podcast season?
No, I mean, it figures we'd start a podcast in the middle of 2020, right? The strangest year in modern memory, but I'd like to think that maybe our podcast helped a couple people, laugh a little bit and talk about hockey and get their mind off of how, fucked up the real world was for everybody this year. But that being said, going forward, I'm also very excited to keep doing this every week. I think it's fun, it's interesting. I love being able to talk about hockey and see what everybody else thinks. And I don't know, it helps me. It helped to look at the game a little different too, you know, because you're not always just watching passively. You're kind of like looking for things because you're always kind of looking to see what you want to talk about next, you know, which is good. So overall, I mean, like, I had a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to season two.
Yeah, for sure. And we got big things coming in season two. We got a lot of different stuff that we've been theorizing and throwing around. So season two is going to be another type like season one, where you're going to see some different stuff. We're going to try some new things, grow the podcast in any way we can. Obviously, like I said, if you guys ever have any suggestions, you have any topics you want us to hit on, you have any ideas, feel free to leave those down in the comment section. I always go through and read all of the comments that are left for us. So for one last time for season one, although like I said, you're really not gonna have to wait that long. You're gonna have to wait less than a week for season two. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys again at the draft.